Many of us know about the American Revolution and how the 13 colonies gained independence from Great Britain. But did you know that Canada also had a revolution at some point too? If yes, then good for you. If not, then listen here. This whole debacle occurred from 1837 to 1838 between the territories of Upper Canada and Lower Canada, which no longer exists today, and the rest of Canada. Ironically, when the two breakaway states did exist, Lower Canada, green, was actually above Upper Canada, orange. But anyways, it was mostly funded by rich families in both Upper and Lower Canada, while being fought by untrained commonsmen. The causes for these territories to break away were different, as Lower Canadian French speakers felt underrepresented in the legislature, leading up to strikes, boycotts, and sabotage. Then Upper Canada rebelled because of their unregulated oligarchy and rising tensions between the British and all who consider themselves French in the area. The outcomes they both wanted for themselves were independence, of course, and a mixed monarchy. A mix of a monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. I should also add that two rebels of the many who fled to the U.S., Charles Combe and Robert Nelson, created a minor, mostly American, military force that we called the Hunters Lodge. This group would be raised in British camps across the Canadian border from America upwards 12 times. These will later be grouped together under the Patriot War. These would keep going until it was suppressed by the American government. We fast forward to a little bit before the Battle of Saint Eustache, and the war situation hasn't really been much of a war in terms of side-by-side battles, since, as I said, it has mostly been raids on camps with minimal losses. Meanwhile, the rebels in America set up a Republic of Lower Canada there, which is also known as the Locofocos. The Locofocos had been launching raids across the border as usual, and were trying to get more supplies and resources from their supporters in Upper and Lower Canada, who were being stopped by the British military. However, this time was different, and quite unfortunate for the British forces. They had been anticipating another raid on their camp, which was right on the pathway the rebels were taking to Canada. So they prepared, and as anticipated, the Locofocos arrived at the camp, not so quietly, which alerted the soldiers. They quickly armed themselves and prepared to open fire on the raiders, but to their misfortune, some exposed gunpowder exploded, which killed one and injured all else around it. This mishap would provide a large enough distraction to let the Locos inside and for them to hold the remaining British forces captive. This would be very good for the Locos because the camp had very useful resources stockpiled that would progress themselves in their travels and battles. From here, the Locos would keep moving north. This trek would be mostly uninterrupted besides for a few storms and a couple close calls with British lookouts. But eventually they made it to the heart of Lower Canada, where they were making preparations for the battle to come at Saint Eustache in present-day Quebec. They thought they could recruit approximately 800 men, but because the Locos arrived and they sort of knew what they were doing, just over 1,000 men showed to fight for their independence. Soon enough, the government force led by John Colborne were spotted in the distance. The government military presence here was 1,500 strong to the rebels' 1,000. However, the rebel command was well versed on the British battle strategy and used it to their advantage. Additionally, all of their men had weaponry, unlike in our timeline. So when the government force began surrounding the village and closing on the rebels from their posts and windows on roofs opened fire and defeated hundreds of the opposition before they can even react. Then once they lost the element of surprise, they hid back in their spots and reloaded. Then once Commander Colborne knew of this, he and what remained of his men retreated westward. For the rebellions, this was a major victory, as they now knew they could survive standing up to the British military. It also allowed the citizens of Upper and Lower Canada to feel free to support their rebellions in hope of gaining independence. There was also a large number of people signing up for the military to get a better chance of beating British again. This anticipated attack would come soon after by a butthurt Commander Colborne and about 1,600-ish troops. But once again, Colborne was defeated and forced to retreat because he didn't predict the increase of opposing troops, because now their numbers had reached about 2,500 going every day. Once back on British land, former Commander Colborne was demoted, and since his ego was already bruised, he straight up just quit his job and went home. And from here, the states of Upper and Lower Canada were left alone, and a couple of years later, they gained official independence from Britain under their same names. A bit later on, however, they would unite under the great and fearsome name of East Canada.